So as we get to this page 47, lesson 8, we just see here the story of the judges, and let me give you the blanks here to start with. Under the story of the Old Testament, God allows His people to see the problem of sin cannot be handled by, and the first group is the patriarchs. Patriarchs, and we're talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. You know, it cannot be handled by the patriarchs. And God had really blessed them, every one of them. You know, and people they still didn't follow God like they should have. The second group of people would be deliverers, and this would be Moses and Aaron. He delivered them out of Egypt, and we were talking about that the other day. I was talking with somebody, and they said, you know, they'd no more got out of Egypt, and Moses went up on the mountain and came back down, and they'd already built a calf. You know, it was like right away they had rejected. The third one would be conquerors, and conquerors would be like Joshua and Caleb. They were the ones that went in and conquered the promised land, but eventually people still don't. And then the fourth one would be judges. That's where we're at tonight. And there's several judges, quite a few of them. Some of the ones you might know probably would maybe be Deborah or Eli, but we'll go through them here in a little bit. And then the fifth one, we haven't got there yet, but it would be kings. After the period of the judges comes the period of the kings. And there's only ever 3 kings in all of Israel that rule all of Israel. And that would be Saul, David, and Solomon. So those are the 3 kings. And they each reigned 40 years. And then the last would be builders, what we would call builders or / kind of like a revivalist type person. And we haven't got to that point yet, but we will. These will be people like Nehemiah and Ezra, Zerubbabel. They went back, Ezra, especially Zerubbabel and Ezra, went back and started rebuilding the temple after Jerusalem was destroyed in 586 BC. 70 years later, they went back and started rebuilding. And then Nehemiah comes back and builds the wall around Jerusalem in 52 days. So but still, the people turned away again after that. And so, you know, you get to Jesus' day, and it's like God's tried everything. You know, He's tried patriarchs, He's tried deliverers, conquerors, judges, kings, builders. I mean, again and again and again, He's tried to let people have a chance to do it their way and do it right, but it never turns out. They still cannot conquer the problem. And so the next blank is only Jesus Christ can get us out of our problem. So the Israelites are now in Canaan, but there's a problem. And I already read you verse 10 of chapter 2 at the bottom of your page. After that whole generation, we're talking about the generation. If you remember what we were talking about last week, as we talked about the conquest to conquer the land through Joshua, and we talked about that. Remember how we talked about they conquered it little by little, and then we looked on page 45 and saw the layout, the map that shows where all the tribes and everything are. And so after that period of time, the book of Judges says there in verse 10 of chapter 2, after that generation grew up, the next generation didn't know the miracles like the ones that actually experienced it. You know, the guys and the men and women that were there when Jericho walls fell down, and when they went in and had battle with all these Canaanites, and they were given all this land and conquered all these cities, the next generation grows up, all they know is stories, right? But they've not experienced it. So they don't follow the Lord. And I want to let me see. Let me read you some scripture passages that will kind of make a point. The first one I'm going to read is Isaiah 24:5. And Isaiah writes, "The earth is defiled by its people. They have disobeyed the laws, violated the statutes, and broken the everlasting covenant." Pretty clear, isn't it? Yeah, the world is defiled by people. People. Let me find another one here. Jeremiah chapter 11 is a great passage beginning with verse 1. He says, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah from the Lord. "Listen to the terms of the covenant and tell the people of Judah and to those who live in Jerusalem. Tell them that this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Cursed is the man who does not obey the terms of this covenant, the terms I commanded your forefathers when I brought them out of Egypt, out of the iron smelting furnace. I said, obey and do everything I command you, and you will be my people, and I will be your God. Then I will fulfill the oath I swore to your forefathers, to give them the land flowing with milk and honey, the land you possess today. I answered, Amen, Lord. The Lord said to me, proclaim all these words to the towns of Judah and to the streets of Jerusalem. Listen to the terms of the covenant and follow them. From the time I brought your forefathers up from Egypt until this day, I have warned them again and again, saying, obey me. But they did not listen or pay attention. Instead, they followed the stubbornness of their own evil hearts. So I brought on them all the curses of the covenant I had commanded them to follow, but that they did not keep. Then the Lord said to me, there is a conspiracy among the people of Judah and those who live in Jerusalem. They have returned to the sins of their forefathers who refused to listen to my words. They have followed other gods to serve them. Both the house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken the covenant made with their forefathers. And then I don't know if you've ever read that passage before, but God's pretty clear. And Jeremiah, you got to remember, Jeremiah is the last prophet before Israel is destroyed. He's there when Israel gets destroyed. Lamentations is his book, and Lamentations basically means lament. It means like weeping. He's there when Jerusalem's getting destroyed. Solomon's temple is destroyed. And God's telling the people through Jeremiah, I've told you and told you and told you and told you ever since I brought you out of Egypt. You just keep turning away. You just keep turning away. And this is when Jeremiah writes, we're in Jerusalem's destroyed in 586. And so it's been more than a millennial and a half, really, that God's been telling him, and he's given them all these people that you wrote down there to try to get them straight, and it doesn't happen. And then let me find the end of Jeremiah here. In Jeremiah 50 verse 5, he says, They will ask the way to Zion and turn their faces toward it. They will come and bind themselves to the Lord, an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. He said there's going to be a day, in those days, declares the Lord, there's going to be a day, and they'll seek the Lord, and they'll come, and they'll bind themselves in an everlasting covenant. So it's a little bit of a hope coming in the future. But then when you read Malachi, which is the last book in the Old Testament, in Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, he says, "See, I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to the temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you desire will come, says the Lord Almighty." And then in Luke chapter 22, verse 20, it says, in the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This is the cup in the new covenant in my blood." So you see what's happening? God had warned them for all these centuries, and they kept turning away. So finally, he starts prophesying, saying, "Okay, I'm going to send my messenger. I'm going to send Christ, and there's going to be one who's going to come prepare the way." And it's like God has to do it because people aren't going to follow. So does that make sense? Any thoughts? People are people, right? Aren't people fun? I mean, I love you guys, but I don't like anybody else. You know? People will hurt you, right? They'll disappoint you. They'll do damage to you. Not everybody, obviously. But man, God, I mean, even before he flooded the earth, he said he was sorry he made man. You know, it's like God does everything for people. And we're in the, I think we're in the most blessed category there is. I mean, and this time frame that we live in is amazing, really.
That's another one of those puzzling. You know, we hear Scripture say that God was sorry that He made man. We know God doesn't make mistakes.
Right.
But it's almost like He was, I made a mistake by making it. You know,
yeah.
The way that's worded, at least, you know, in our human, the way we think about that, it almost.
Well, I
like
think
He's admitting that
God has feelings too. You know, God has feelings.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had probably 3, maybe 4 people in my life tell me they wish they'd never had kids because their kids hurt them so much when they got older. Yeah. So when you get to the point where you say that, you've been hurt really bad. And I think God, you know, what God does is He has to step in and redeem mankind, but it's who He is. I mean, He can still be sorry and He can still be really hurt, but He takes the action to step in and die. And that's how He brings glory to Himself, by being who He is, because that's what love does. Love has to show itself, right? And so
It also makes you wonder, and I think I know the answer to this, but it's like, why did God choose these people? You know, but we know that I guess the answer that I answer myself, and I think it's because He needed to have a lineage for Christ to be sent.
Yeah.
You know, He needed to have that.
And there's no mistake about the fact that it was all Him.
Yeah.
I mean, mankind can't take any glory at all. It's all Him. So.
But they don't. You know, the Jewish people are pretty unremarkable people. You know, they're pretty normal, sinful.
Yeah.
You know, constantly turning from God. You know, and doing what they think is right in their eyes instead of His eye. You know, whole thing. You know.
Yep.
They're just human beings. Anyway.
Any other thoughts?
Just that I think it would have been a different time because there was no Holy Spirit to guide them on it.
Yeah.
So, and they had nowhere to look to. So what they really have was just what they were taught, passed down. I think it would have been hard. It would have been easy to put in their spot.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah, they would have had copies of portions of the Old Testament, maybe, but nothing like what we've got. That's what I said. We're in the most blessed time. I mean, we're very blessed. So we have a lot of truth and knowledge. So Okay, page 48. What had God told them to do? These commandments I give you today are be up on your hearts, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you're walking along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. It's like this is to be a regular part of your life. And you know, he had told in Deuteronomy 6:6 there, he had told the people, pass this down, you know, but the Israelites had not obeyed. And basically, remember, God said to do three things. Remember, we talked about that? He said, worship, obey me, identify with me, and worship me. That was the three things he said. And when you get to Jeremiah's day, they're worshiping false gods again. They're worshiping the Baals. They're putting their children in the Baals' fire. And you know, it's just hard to believe that they reverted back to the same gods that were, and Moloch is alive today, believe it or not. There's symbols in the world today that stand for Moloch. So it's not over, and it won't be over till Christ returns. But people have constantly turned away, and it seems like the Israelites, as each generation succeeded the Lord, or succeeded on to the next generation, you know, that they weren't obedient to God. And so the nasty cycle begins, and this is a nasty cycle. Actually, the book of Judges is a book of sickness, really, of human beings, is what it is. And it's the Israelites continuing to do evil again and again. And and there's a key phrase in the book, and I'm going to read these to you, so that, because I think hearing these again and again are powerful. So you don't have to turn with me, but you have them listed there above the circle on your page. See where it says Judges, the Israelites did evil, Judges 2:11. In chapter 2, verse 11, then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. Remember the Baal god? In chapter 3, verse 7, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asherahs. In chapter 3, verse 12, it says, once again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord because they did this, what they did to the king Eglon. And they gave them power over the Israelites. In chapter 4, verse 1, after Ehud died, the Israelites once again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord sold them off into the hands of Jabin, the king of Canaan. In chapter 6, verse 1, it says, again, this is during Gideon's time. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And they were handed over to the Midianites for 7 years. In chapter 10, verse 6, again, the Israelites did, this is in Jephthah's reign as a judge. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They served the Baals and the Asherahs and the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. And because the Israelites forsook the Lord and no longer served him, he became angry at them. No wonder he's getting mad, right? He gets mad again and again. And then the last one is 13:1, and again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. That's during Samson's time. So as we go through these judges, you'll begin to understand that this kept happening all the way through. And there's a cycle that happens. And it's, God wants to be their king, and he keeps putting these judges over them to rule over them. But what happens is these cycles are followed. There's 7 different cycles in the book of Judges. There's 7 of them. So basically, you have this cycle, and there's these stations, these 5 different stations. And over through the whole book of Judges, you have this cycle, and then it's kind of like they just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse as each cycle happens. So the first thing that happens in the first part is sin takes place. That's what happens. The second place is what we call servitude. And servitude is basically meaning that what happens is they got into sin, so God brings in an enemy nation to conquer them or to kill them or cause all kinds of problems. And so there's kind of a period of sinning. Then there's a period of they're under the control of somebody else, like we just read. They put them under the control of the Philistines for 40 years. And then the third thing that happens is supplication. And these all just start with S. That's why we're using this word. But supplication means really cry out to God. So God, help us, help us, help us, help us, help us. And then the fourth thing that happens is what God does again and again. He saves them. He comes in, saves them. They repent here, right? And he saves them. And then the fifth thing that happens is silence. You have a period of time where the people kind of turn back to God. They don't really have any enemies. You know, it's kind of a peaceful time. Then they get back into sin again. And then God sends in another enemy nation. And then they cry out to God. God saves them through some means, through a judge or through some means. And then they go through this fire. This happens in the book of Judges 7 times. It's just again and again and again. And by the way, this happens over about 330 years. So this is a long time. A long time. And what happens is, because this happens over a long period of time, it's the same sort of thing we were talking about earlier. The people get into sin, and then they get conquered by a nation, and then they cry out to God. God comes and saves them. But then there's a period of silence. Now you get back up to here, and you got a new generation. Not the one that saw God's salvation, but you got a new generation, just like they hadn't seen what God had done, and they get back into sin again, and it happens again. This happens again and again and again. Well, that's what happens through the book of Judges. And any thoughts on that at all? It's not really a wonderful history to be a part of, right?
You mentioned Moloch. Is that a demon?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just heard that name.
There
recently.
are people from Hollywood and places like that have Moloch, like little symbols and stuff. Yeah, he's alive and well.
Was Moloch viewed as a god as
Mhm.
well? Or I
Yeah.
know Baal or Baals,
Moloch was viewed as a god. He was a god, I
a
think.
god figure.
Yeah, he was a god figure that had hands
And
out
they-
with a
fire, and they laid the
he
babies
had
in
they
there.
laid the babies in the fire, and
Yeah.
they would also make him walk into fire. They would make children walk into fire.
Walk into the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Podcast that I was listening to that mentioned this. I was like, it's like he's still really alive and well because of abortion
Mhm.
and how
Yeah, because they had
babies are
sex, like the sex goddess that they worshipped.
Mhm.
And then they would have all these wild parties, and then the ladies would get pregnant, and then they would give their babies to Moloch or whatever
yeah,
by worshiping him
yeah.
that way. Sacrifice the kids.
Yeah.
You have to be pretty messed up though in the head to send your child into have them walk into a fire.
Pretty messed up is right. Yeah. It's just hard to wrap your brain around that.
Because you don't die quickly with your fire.
Yeah,
You sit there for a minute.
no.
You know, appeasing the gods.
And that's always been
Your favorite.
the ultimate sacrifice is the sacrifice of human. I remember when the first time I went to Africa, before I moved over, I went for about a 5-week period of time, and there was a lady in our denomination. Her name was June Brown, and she was in Africa for like 38 years. She went straight out of college, was there, and when I got there, when I lived there, she was my boss, but I had huge respect for her, and she always had a VW, a Bug. And King Street Church, I think, bought her 5 of them over the period of her 38 years there. And her and I were out one night going out to this church. I was supposed to speak at this church, and it was after dark. And she always had a shotgun, but down right beside her in the car. And this guy, we came around this corner and came in this village, and this guy came out to the street. He recognized her car, and they go like this, stop, slow down, stop. And she recognized this guy. It was one of her past students who was an adult man. And he starts telling her that the men's group over there's women's group and men's group. And the men's group, occasionally, they have a thing and they drink and they want to sacrifice. This is the natives. They want to sacrifice either a woman or a child. And he's telling us that they're out looking for somebody to sacrifice. June goes, "It's okay, I got this." And we went on. Never saw him, but that's just the way it was over there. But yeah, the ultimate, that's always been true in history, is you get evil to its deepest core. What people want to do is sacrifice a human, because that's what
God
evil
hates
wants
the
to do.
most.
Yeah.
You
Huh?
know, that's what God would hate the most.
Exactly. It's what Satan wants to do, because God hates it so much.
It's
Yeah.
almost like it's a perversion of the blood sacrifice to cover sin thing, It's almost like a false.
Well, it's basically mocking it, and it's, like you're saying, it's just mocking it.
Yeah.
I've never
And
really
it's
thought about it like
it's
that.
probably way more prevalent in the world than what you know. Chrissy and I watched a video a couple years ago of this British girl, and she was probably about 8, maybe 9, and she was telling what was going on at her school, and she was just openly saying that the teachers would take them in a room, and the kids that would have sex with them, they would give them candy and stuff like that. And she said it happened, and the guy asked her, "Well, how many of the teachers do this?" And she looked at him kind of funny, and she goes, "All of them." And then she was talking about at her home, they had killed a baby. They hung the baby up on the wall, and the man made her hold the knife and cut the baby's throat. And she had seen this so many times that she was just matter-of-factly telling it. And I don't know if it's 100% true, but it sure seemed like it. I mean, they weren't doing it to make money. They were just telling a story. But I think there's a lot of evil out there in the world today.
A couple of things on that current events, but you guys probably all know that Homeland Security, I guess that's the agency. They're admitting now that there are 340,000 children. It's 325 to 340 missing immigrant children. This invasion at the southern border. They lost 300 and some thousand children. A lot of people don't know that. They cannot account for them. What in the world do you think has happened to those kids?
Yeah. Well, I read here a few years ago that they estimate that sex slavery in the United States, that there's at least 300,000 people tied up in somebody's basement or somewhere
Probably.
as sex slaves.
Probably more
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah.
If we knew.
Well, they said
It's a
they're-
sick world,
they're using the
really.
kids for labor too,
Mhm.
child labor.
And also, they harvest. This is a horrible thing, but harvest the body parts.
Mm-hmm.
Selling live, viable body parts is huge. In black market, it's just so heinous. When you read about this is ugly stuff, most people don't want to deal with this. But
Yeah.
It's
Well,
terrible.
human beings can get to a point that's pretty bad, and that's what they've done in history past. I mean, that's, you know, we look at the Old Testament and say, yeah, they served this God and they gave Moloch their babies, you know, but it happens in other ways now. Satan is going to use the way of that society that's most effective. You know what I'm saying? Where today maybe abortion's the most effective way. I don't know, but
When did the selling of body parts become legal in our country? Because they say that Planned Parenthood is actually, you know, these aborted babies and stuff, they dissect them and sell the parts and stuff of these, and the tissue and all, and the,
It's been for a while now.
yeah, I mean, it is, but when did we all vote on that, you know? When did our society decide that it's a good thing to harvest?
well, the stem cell stuff has been going on for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very controversial, but they pushed ahead with that anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a matter of fact.
Yeah, it's bad. People can
That's
get
all.
bad.
That's all in this.
Yeah,
spirit
and
of-
so, you know, you see this cycle, and it just continues to show what people will do. And you know, down there on your page it says God's plan for the judges. The Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of raiders, yet they would not listen to the judges, but prostituted themselves to other gods and worshipped them. Unlike their fathers, they quickly turned away, in which their fathers had walked in the way of obedience to the Lord's commands. And then God's plan for the alien nations. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and said, because this nation has violated the covenant I laid down for their forefathers and has not listened to me, I'll no longer drive out before them any nations Joshua left when he died. I will use them to test Israel and see whether they'll keep the way of the Lord and walk in it as their forefathers did. The Lord had allowed these nations to remain. He did not drive them out at once by giving them into the hands of Joshua. So God was using that as a test. And so, you know, when you read that, God's got a plan for these alien nations, and that's what he does with them. Okay, page 49. Now, you've got several blanks there, and I'll help you fill in those blanks. But these people are in these people that are in this are judges, and you can see the 7 cycles there. And it's just I got a little bit of scripture passage to give you for each one. So cycle number 1, the first guy is Othniel, Othniel. I can write these down for you. And he ruled for 40 years. And the scripture is Judges 3:7-10. And the alien nation that God raised up against them is Mesopotamia. The next one is Ehud and Shamgar, and Ehud ruled about 80 years, and Shamgar ruled for 3.
Are they both in cycle 2?
Cycle 2, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
I should have said that. Thank you. So that's cycle 2. Ehud and Shamgar. Ehud ruled 80 years. Shamgar ruled 3. And every one of them, you know, there's stories, you know, about every one of them. And the reference for them is 3:12-31. And the Moabites is the alien nation. Okay, the third cycle then is Deborah. And she ruled 40 years. And that's 4 verse 5.
Yeah. Anything on the alien nations for?
Yeah, the alien nation for Deborah would be the Canaanites. Cycle 4 would be Gideon, and he reigned 40 years, and that's in chapter 6, verse 8. And Midianites were the nation. God uses a lot of different people to.
Is it Mennonites?
Midianites.
Not
No.
Mennonites.
Could be the Midianites, I guess. That's an I. Midianites. They always woke up about 3 o'clock. That was funny.
You can put the laugh track in the video.
Yeah, you'll get it tomorrow. Tola, this is the 5th cycle, and Jair, and 23 years and 22 years. And you see them in chapter 10, 1 to 5. And this is a particular person, Abimelech.
For the alien nation?
Yeah, for the alien nation. Okay, as you can see, the box in 6 is bigger. So we got 5 people in this. Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon. I mean, it might have been Elon Musk. I'm not sure. Abdon and Eli. You know who Eli is. So, and they ruled for 6, 7, 10, 8, and 40. And that was the Ammonites and the Philistines who came against them at times. The 7th cycle is a guy you know, Samson, and he ruled 20 years, and that's in 13:1, and again it would be the Philistines. Just a lot of really interesting stories, especially like Gideon, you know, some of the things that Gideon did. In fact, you remember the spring where they were up against the, who was it? Midianites, I believe. Yeah, Midianites. they he took all of his men, remember, down to the spring, and they drank, and the ones that lapped it up versus the ones that used their hands, and they separated them, you know, and they got down to like 300 people, and everybody else could go. And I was at that spring, and I made sure I didn't drink out of it, but I acted like I was, you know. But you can still go to that spring. It's pretty cool. I've only ever been there once, but you can still go there, and it's just a great story because all the way around the hills, you know, where they could see, you know, where the people were and stuff. So the guys, you know, took their jars and their lamps and went up on the hill, and then they destroyed all the Midianites that day, and that was all God's doing, you know. And of course, the story of Eli, we know about Eli, and a lot of things happened with him and his sons, and then also we know about Samson, you know, what happened with him. Any thoughts about any of that?
So Samson, that was at the end of the 330
Mhm.
years.
Yep.
And that takes us to about what year BC, roughly? How far?
I can tell you approximately.
I mean, just close. Just
Um,
rough it in.
It would have been. Hang on a minute.
We have a timeline back here.
Yeah, I've got one here somewhere. Look on page 66.
Oh, 66. Okay.
66 is the timeline before. This was the timeline when kings started ruling in the north and the south. And so we know that Saul, David, and Solomon reigned 120 years. So 120 years before this time, which would make it about 1,050, would be close to the end of the Judges. That make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of a rule of thumb is King David was around the year 1000, but
Okay.
but Saul, David, and Solomon each reigned 40 years. So, and when you get to the conclusion of the book of Judges, you have that there in the bottom of your page. It says, "In those days Israel had no king, and everyone did as he saw fit." Can you imagine that if that happened today?
Chaos.
Absolute chaos.
Anarchy.
Yeah, it would be. Yep. That's what we're going to see here on November 2nd, or maybe the 3rd, right? Pray the Lord will be gracious to us, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, page 50. Samuel. Samuel is a unique character. He is the he's a person that you want to remember. Samuel is just a good person. He is he's the last judge, although he's not in our list. He's the last judge, and he's the first of the great prophets. So he's a very unique character. He the story about Samuel and his mother and her promise to God that she wanted to become pregnant, and you know, she it said that she would give her son. Hannah said that she would give her son, and you can see that in 1 Samuel 1, beginning with verse 21. she takes her son, she goes to the temple, and the priest tells her, that she'll have a son, and she goes back when the kid gets weaned and takes him and presents him to the Lord. And just it's really a story of her mother, a mother and her promise. I don't really have anything for you to write down there, but it's a very unique story, because this is a woman who wanted a child and promised God that she would give him to the Lord if God would give her a child, and so she did. And Samuel was a very, very godly man. So we see his call in 1 Samuel chapter 3, and he's there. Eli's the priest, and he's there, and God calls him in the night, and God called him, and he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am. What do you need?" Right? You know that story, because and then he goes back. God calls him again, and then the third time, Eli says, just say, "Yes, Lord, here I am. I'm your servant." Because he realized that maybe it was God calling him, and Eli calls and says, and gives him a message of what he's going to give. The message, that. And that's the middle of chapter 3. I know this wasn't part of your reading. He says, he came down, he was afraid to tell Eli the vision. Eli said to him, "Samuel, here I am." Now we're in verse 17 of chapter 3. "What is it you want?" Eli asked. He said, "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you ever so severely if you hide from me anything." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing. And here, what Eli had said, or what the God had said to him, God was against his family, and he was going to judge Eli. So he had 2 sons, and he did not restrain them, and so the guilt or the consequences of that was going to be on Eli's house, and it was going to be carried out to him. And so the ark was captured, and that's what we were talking about, his message. So the next section there in the middle of page 50, it says God makes his message to Samuel a reality. And that's 1 Samuel chapter 4. This prophecy that God had given to Samuel came true, and it happens. And he's got 2 sons, Phinehas and Hophni, and what happens is you got number 1 there. Israel loses, and it's the ark. They lose the ark of the covenant. They think they went and got the ark. It had been at Shiloh, and they got the ark and they brought it. And it says the Philistines fought against the Israelites, defeated it. Every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. So this battle that happened was very severe. They had, the Ark of the Covenant is the chest, and they took it to battle because in previous times when Israel was obedient, God would say, they'd take the Ark and God would be with them, like they did when they conquered Jericho. They took the Ark out. But God's not with them now. They're disobedient. God didn't say to do this. They look at the Ark as some kind of a magic box that You know, if we have the ark, God's going with us, you know. It's like God's doing what we're saying instead of us doing what God's saying to do. You know, it's like laying your hand on the Bible before you and swear you're not going to lie right before you lie. You know, it's like it doesn't mean anything, right? If because God's got to be a part of it, and He's got to be a part of who the person is. And so they do that. There is, and as the story goes there in chapter 4, a Benjamite boy ran and went back and told Eli what was going on. And when he mentioned that the ark of God was captured, Eli fell backward off his chair. Verse 18 says, of chapter 4, and he fell and broke his neck. He was an old man, and he was very heavy, and he had lived 40 years. Well, his daughter-in-law, which was the wife of Phinehas, and so under number 2, Eli dies with him, and so do his sons Hophni and Phinehas. Hophni is Hophni. Phinehas is Phineas. So Eli and both of his sons die the same day. And then the third thing that happens is this story, and you have the word Ichabod there. And Phinehas' wife is pregnant, and she's at the time of delivery, and when she's giving birth, and she was overcome by the labor pains, and this is happening right after the ark gets captured. And she said, and they tell her she's going to give birth to a son, but she doesn't respond, and she's not paying any attention. But before she died, she named the child Ichabod. And Ichabod means the Lord has departed, or the glory of the Lord has departed, is what it means. So that's what number 3 is. The glory of the Lord has departed. So she dies, and that's what happens. And so the next thing that happens then is the story of Dagon in 1 Samuel 5. Are you guys familiar with that story? Anybody? The story of Dagon is very interesting. Chrissy and I we're actually going through 1 Samuel right now. We're a bit further on, but we went through this story of Dagon. So what happens is the Philistines capture the ark, and what they're thinking is, we'll take it to our God, the temple we have our God in, and their God is Dagon. So they put the Ark of the Covenant in there, and Dagon's this big statue, and they go in the next day, it says, and we're in chapter 5, the next day, Dagon has fallen to the ground before the ark. I mean, the statues fell down. So they put him back in his place, but then the next morning, Dagon's fallen on his face again before the Ark of the Covenant, only this time his heads and his hands break off the statue. So it's like, there's a God in the house, right? And they don't want anything to do with this, and God starts inflicting people, and it says in verse 6 there that the Lord's hand was heavy upon the people of Ashdod and its vicinity, and he brought devastating affliction on them with tumors. And by the way, just an interesting side note, that word tumors can also be translated hemorrhoids. This could be what God did. I don't know. I wasn't there, but it's like that could have been what God has done. So when they saw this was happening, they said the ark of God of the Israelites cannot stay here, right? I mean, our gods fell over. Now everybody's got these tumors, and so they have the Ark of God. They take it to Gath. You know what Gath is? Anybody remember what's important about Gath? That's the hometown of Goliath. That's where he's from. So they take it to Gath, and but after they moved it there, the Lord was against that city. He threw the people in a panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with an outbreak of tumors. So they sent the god to Ekron. And the ark of God was entering Ekron, and the people of Ekron cried out, "They brought the ark of the God of Israel to us to kill us and our people." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, "Send the ark of God of Israel away. Let it go to its own place, or it's going to kill us." For death had filled the city with panic, and God had filled the city with panic. Death was everywhere, and the Lord was heavy upon them. And those who did not die were afflicted with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up against heaven. So then in chapter 6, what they do is they return the ark. The ark of the Lord had been in the Philistine territory 7 months. And then they called for the priest and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord?" It's interesting because they call it the ark of the Lord, right? Because it's pretty obvious to them there's a God attached to this thing. And tell us, should we send it back to them? And they said, "If you return the ark of the God to Israel, do not send it away empty, but by all means send a guilt offering to him." And I think that's interesting too. They know to send an offering. Then you'll be healed, and you'll know why his hand has been lifted from you. So the Philistines asked, "What guilt offering should we send them?" They replied, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, in according with the number of Philistine rulers, because you and your rulers make models of the tumors and of the rats that are destroying the country. So they were having that rat problem, and pay honor to Israel's God. Perhaps he'll lift his hand, and you and your gods off your land. Why harden your hearts as the Egyptians and the Pharaoh did? See, they're tying this clear back. I mean, this is a long time earlier, but they still know what happened in Egypt when they had this ark. And so they said he treated them harshly, and they did not send the Israelites out so they could go on their way. So then the priests tell them, get a new cart, a brand new cart, get 2 cows that have calved and have never been yoked, and hitch the cows to the cart, take their calves away from them, pin them up, and take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart, and in a chest beside it put the gold objects you're sending back to them as a guilt offering. Send it on its way. Keep watching it. If it goes to its own territory towards Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if he does not, then we will know that it was not his hand that struck us, and it's happened by chance. So here's what happened. They're taking these cows that have calves, and they're pinning the calves up. They're putting these cows on, yoking them on this cart. You're not going to get a cow to leave its calf. It's not going to happen. But they put these cows on this calf because they want to know if God's doing this. Because they know those cows are not going to leave the calves, right? So they did this. They took the cows, hitched them to the cart, pinned up the calves. They placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, and the gold rats and the tumors, and the cows went straight towards Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing all the way, crying all the way. And they did not turn to the right or the left, and the rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. And it says, now the people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting, and they looked up and they saw the cart coming with the ark on it. And it said the people chopped up firewood when it came into town, and they sacrificed the 2 cows. So these cows wasn't a good day, right? And so the Lord gave him this, and that day the people of Beth Shemesh offered the offerings, and of course the people in Ashdod and Gaza and Gath and Ekron and all them, and the 5 rulers that ruled over them, they understood that they understood this was to God, and in fact, the men of Beth Shemesh said, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom will the ark go from here?" And then they sent messages on and told them that the ark had come back. So just a interesting story that the god of Dagon kept falling down on the ground in front of the ark. So, any thoughts? God must have a sense of humor, right? God had. He created all of us, right? Okay, the story of Ruth. It's a really short book. It does have a lot of good lessons, and we're just honestly not going to spend much time at all in that. It's what do you know about what about Ruth? Anybody?
She was faithful to her mother-in-law.
Yeah, Naomi.
Yeah,
Mm,
they both lost their husbands.
yeah,
And Naomi sent the two daughter-in-laws, said, "Go back to your families.
Yeah.
Leave me and go back to your families." The one daughter-in-law went back to the family, but Ruth said, "No,
No.
Wherever you go, I go.
I go, yeah.
Your people are my people," or however that was said.
mm,
So she stayed with her and ended up finding a redeemer.
yeah,
They found their relative who ended up marrying Ruth,
right.
and kind of provided for Naomi and Ruth, whatever.
hmm
So,
And I think one of the lessons too from the book is that God still has a remnant of people. He still has people that have followed him and still want to serve him. God's always got a remnant. There's always some group of people. There's always some family. There's always somebody that follows him. And Ruth was certainly a godly woman. So, and she's in the line of David. So it's a very powerful story in the sense that Ruth is David's great grandmother, actually. So that's kind of a interesting note. But the purpose of the book is basically to show that there's a godly remnant, and that remnant is in the line of David.
which means also in the line of Jesus.
Uh-huh.
Jesus' bloodline.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's found in Matthew 1:5 is her name is mentioned there. So it's just kind of an interesting story. Boaz marries Ruth, and that field where they got married was I've been to that place a couple times. to that particular spot. Any thoughts? Well, next time, we're going to talk a little bit more about Samuel, Saul and David and Samuel. There's much more to learn from Samuel. He's certainly a man of prayer. So if you could read 1 Samuel 1 to 26, and then 28 and 31. I know that's a lot of chapters, but, you know, as much as you can, read that, and then we'll learn about Saul being the first king of Israel. So we are going into the glory stage. Okay, the glory stage is that period of time during that 120 years when Saul, David, and Solomon reigned, and the Israelites wanted a king, so God gave them a king, and so that's the story that takes place there. Everybody okay?
Yeah.